they had members with incomes ranging from one extreme to the other. Myself and Shekhar Chaudhary of IIM Lucknow were at one end, Ratan Tata was at the other end. So we had this whole spectrum of people in the committee. We did submit a report, and I'll share some ideas from that report, broad ideas from that report. And thirdly, I'd like to talk a little bit about innovation, as I see it. First is the role of the university. There's a paradigm called the triple helix paradigm. Many of you may be familiar with it. It's all over there in Google. The word triple helix, of course, is borrowed simply because it's fashionable. There's nothing to do with the triple helix of the fame across the road. In case you don't know, the triple helix structure was discovered by G.N. Ramchandran. He actually wrote a paper that was rejected by Crick. And later, Crick adopted the technique Ramchandran suggested after having rejected Ramchandran's paper. Because Ramchandran's paper was subsequently published. But in any case, coming back, the triple helix paradigm simply says this. It says three things you must know about the university. First is university and its environment. First is that innovation is not a scientific pull or social push process. Society can't push you into innovation, nor can science pull you into innovation. It's a non-linear process which happens by an integration of several complex processes. Secondly, it says competitiveness does not come from national effort, but actually from small concentrations of companies that work together. You know, most of the innovations have been in small companies, and then big companies buy them out. And then there are accusations that the company's share rating was very higher than it should have been, and so on. But the clever entrepreneurs develop this innovative idea in a small company, quickly sell it to a big company before it's implemented, and make their money and quit and find another innovation. This is a model that seems to work particularly in the Silicon Valley, especially in the IT industry. The third says universities should be direct contributors to the wealth of the nation. I don't agree with that. With the third leg, because I think there is a place for the university and there is a place for its contribution to the economy. Which is why in IIT-Madras they put the research part across the road. When I first approached the Tamil Nadu government, they said, the chief secretary then, a very intelligent person, he said, Ananth, you have 630 acres and you want 10 acres from me. You know, 10 acres now have gone up in price. The price around this place, in case you want to know, that was yesterday's price. Some 65 crores per acre or something. It may have gone up today. I mean, the land prices really go up very fast. But you're talking of something like 700 crores worth of land that's being given by the government of Tamil Nadu for a venture. He said, why are you asking me for that? I said, I have a pure academic land here. I'm willing to do commerce across the road, not here. I mean it, because what happens when you import the industry or the commercial practices into the university, two things happen. One is there is a certain urgency about money making that always takes away the urgency from all other activities. And research is the least urgent of activities. I mean, while if you get obsessed with it, you will do nothing else. But if you don't get obsessed with it, it can always be postponed. I mean, you're not going to crack the problem in 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, 2 months. So you say, okay, what does it matter? Postpone it by a day. Whereas the industry people think money, time is money, and they're going to ask you to deliver yesterday. So you invariably end up doing that. Even in consultancy, that's the problem. We are supposed to spend 1 day in the week, right? Maximum. And that's not exactly the time that faculty spend. When they start taking consultancy, sometimes they just have to deliver and they end up spending much more. We don't micromanage these things. But basically, the problem is that the university has, second problem is that the university's values are different from the values in the marketplace. And they have to be. In fact, I would rather not have IPR on campus. I would rather sell the intellectual property as soon as I get it for the benefit of the community, academic community, rather than hang on to it. Because what it does is, again, it shifts the emphasis from, if you like, Saraswati to Lakshmi. I mean, what we have here is, essentially you're saying choose between the two, have Saraswati. If you choose Saraswati or Lakshmi, and our scriptures tell you can't have both anyway. But that's why I think the universities cannot be direct contributors to wealth, but they can be contributors to wealth through a research park. And ideally the research park should be located outside. The chief secretary took only 5 minutes. He said, He bought the argument immediately and gave me the sanction for the land. But he said this is a piece of paper for the land to actually come to you, it will take 4 years. It took actually 4 years and 9 months because there was also a shift in the government. But in any case, we finally got the land and the research park is going to be launched. We're just hoping the Prime Minister will turn up here to do the launch. Therefore, we're eagerly awaiting that. We don't mind a little delay, but we are hoping he'll come. Because when the Manufacturing Competence Committee report was submitted, and that report has a component on research parks. And the reason we wanted a research park, I must tell you again, is I did some statistics, some collection of statistics in this is 90s, all of the decade. And we did some statistics about Silicon Valley startups and Silicon Valley wealth generation. 70% of IPR generated in Silicon Valley had an Indian name associated with it. And 70% of that had an IITian name associated with it. They were not the only names, there were several names, one of them was an IITian. So I told the government that, I quoted Louis Pasteur out of context, he said in experimental work, and I didn't say that, like Aswatthama, so don't say that class, you say the rest. I told them, discovery is the result of chance meeting a prepared mind. And I said, I've been preparing minds for 50 years, chance is meeting them in Silicon Valley. So I said, why don't we create the opportunity for chance to meet them here? That's the real fact. So we need a research park where industry, people from industry who know the marketplace and they know the value of ideas in the marketplace. We have professors who know the subject very well, and students whose strength, who are not insulted, is their ignorance. Because then they can shoot their mouths off without being afraid of being criticized or not knowing the subject. And one of those ideas that they shoot off, they may shoot off 50 ideas, 48 won't work. But if 2 work, you have a grand success. In fact, the Dennis is pointing out 2% success in all entrepreneurial schemes. So that's really what you're looking at. And this will give you a breakthrough. And also what it does is we all have this 100 monkey syndrome. If 100 monkeys do it, all monkeys do it. I'm not insulting you. I'm just saying if a large number of people do it, then everybody does it. So you need a few people who are successful, then the whole thing catches fire. So that's what we are hoping with the research part. That's about the paradigm. Let me come back to the Manufacturing Competence Committee. When we met, there were a lot of discussions and the final report came out, I think, rather nicely. The main point at that time, you can ignore this 1 year of hiccup in our economy. The main point is that we had targeted a growth of 9% overall. And we have 3 sectors, basically the manufacturing sector, or rather it's called the industry sector, which includes the manufacturing sector. The industry sector, the agricultural sector, and the services sector. As of 4 or 5 years ago, I think the numbers haven't changed very much. The services sector accounts for about 50% of the economy. The agricultural sector accounts for about 20% of the economy. And the remaining is in the industry sector. Actually, 25% is the industry sector, and 22% for the agricultural sector, and the remaining is services, 52% or so. Out of this 25% in the industry sector, the manufacturing sector contributes about 17%, which is much lower than most other countries, even developing countries. You can take Vietnam if you want to take a small country, but Vietnam will beat you by a factor of 2. So you have to watch out in India. The manufacturing sector's contribution has not increased significantly. It's increasing now. Scope is very positive. But the idea was if you want a 9% increase in the economy, agricultural sector cannot be expected to grow faster than 4% in terms of economic contributions. And you have a limit on the services sector. There's some fluctuations. If you take all that into account, the conclusion was that the manufacturing sector has to grow at 12%. And there are 2 constraints to growth in a country like India. Unlike other developed countries, you're not looking for just economic growth, you're also looking for employment. And that's where the small and medium, micro has been added because the old small industries have become, again, somewhat large in terms of investment. There used to be a time when 10 lakhs was small industry. 10 lakhs you do nothing, you can't even get into a medical college, you can't get into an engineering college. So we will not start the industry. Now I think all the numbers have gone up tremendously. So they introduced micro, then they introduced nano, I'm sure, next year. So it will come in again. Because the micro will become too big. But the whole point about this whole sector is that it generates much more employment per unit of investment than the large scale sector. Therefore, it's very, very important. But to a large extent, this is the unorganized sector. Secondly, the real problems here are not technological, they are more managerial. And they are actually problems that are result of a non-ideality in the system rather than anything else. But I think I've learned of late that management schools teach you how to deal with non-ideality in a pragmatic way. So that you work around it, you cost it into the schemes and so on. They used to say earlier that the Tamil Nadu government, although it was corrupt, it was very predictably corrupt, and therefore industry could thrive. Because they knew what the corruption was. Before you get very cynical, let me tell you what B.K. Nehru said. B.K. Nehru used to be ambassador in UK long ago. 20 years ago, he gave a talk here, an external talk. And he explained that corruption was not a peculiarity of India, although we get listed all the time. The fact is that in all countries where services are inexpensive and goods are expensive, there will be tremendous corruption. Whereas where services are expensive and goods are inexpensive, like in the US, they have socialism. The barber comes in a Cadillac. You go in a small car and he becomes the hair cutting salon, you don't have to have a huge Cadillac. Because the car is very inexpensive and the service is very expensive. I mean, for the same haircut that you will get away with, the price has gone up in India. But what you pay 40 rupees for, you will pay for at least $50, $60 there. So that most Indians get their haircuts once a year in India. But let me come back. So one of the important things is how do you grow the micro, small and medium scale industries? Lots of rules, lots of provisions. But one of the problems is that these industries become unaware of these provisions. Secondly, we don't allow parallel processing in this country. You don't list all the things required to start a small industry. You do one thing and then you meet the officer and says, oh, you finished that. Oh, you have this to do. Then he'll give you the next one. We have the same experience with our research part. We found it's not, the number of clearances is not different from the US. But the US, they tell you all the clearances you have to get and how you can parallel process your preparation. Here it goes one after the other. They won't tell you the second one before you finish the first one. So it's sequential processing. That's the big difference. But it's the same thing happens in small and medium scale industries. The other problem in small industries was, at least there was one time when I was very interested in this topic, way back in the 70s, there was a Krishnasamy who was chairman of the Small Industries Association. I've actually worked with him. I was assistant professor in chemical engineering, and there's some industries with wonderful technology that failed. In fact, 70% of small industries used to fail at that time. We've got a better record now. But they failed primarily because of cash flow problems. It's simply a matter of managing. You sell something, you have to get your payment, and you sell it to a big industry, they delay the payment. And this has been a constant problem. And the banks typically will do, Gopal Krishnan will confirm this, they will give you 85% of the money and allow the industry to fail, but won't give you 100% of the money. That is on sales. I mean, they have their policies too. But if you sell something, you can get 85% of the money from the bank, but that 15% will be your cash flow and you won't be able to manage your industry. So this has been a serious problem. But essentially, the measures suggested in the Manufacturing Competence Committee report, which was actually accepted by the Cabinet, by the Prime Minister and Cabinet, are actually very good. But the implementation still has a long way to go. I think one of the things to do is decentralize this. Create things like this, like what we are doing here, initiatives everywhere, where locally you can fund, at least in the beginning, to get the innovator started. And subsequently also, you have to make sure that he is aware of all the privileges that he has. Many privileges are provided for in the law, but they are not taken advantage of simply because he is unaware of it. Sometimes the officer sitting in charge dispensing this also is unaware of it. So you have to read and bring him to his notice saying, look, there is provision for this in the law and so on. So that's another reason why you need programs like this, even just to create awareness. And a person doing it from the management studies makes a lot of sense, because they'll give you another small perspective. I'm basically a thermodynamicist, but I think some of the concepts of thermodynamics are applicable universally. Thermodynamics is two major principles. I won't do more than 3 minutes of thermodynamics, don't get too worried. There are only two major principles. One is the constancy of energy, The second is the ever-increasing nature of entropy. In broad terms, you can interpret energy as content. And in broad terms, the change in the entropy increase represents loss. So essentially, what we in chemical engineering in all disciplines do is to ask, if you have so much content, how much of it will be lost? What will be the net useful content or useful work done? So all classical economies have been maximizing this loss, minimizing this loss due to increase in disorder. Entropy, change in the entropy increase represents disorder increase. Because of disorder you have loss. From the content, if you subtract the loss, you get your net profit or net dividend. So you have to minimize the loss. That was the concept of all classical economy. The IT industry came along because the information theorist Shannon found out that the formula for entropy, if you do a molecular analysis, is really the same as the formula for information, except with a minus sign. So what happened was entropy, the change in the sign made all the difference. All of a sudden there was a new industry in which there was no content, and this is not a derogatory remark. There is no investment, there is no capital investment, you are not talking limitation of energy. You are now talking only the second term, which used to be a subtraction of loss. With a minus sign, the loss became an asset, and all you had to do was maximize this asset. So information, all of information theory industry is about maximizing this. Maximizing this means maximizing order. So if you create order, you can create wealth. Creating order by itself creates wealth, and if you have an industry in which you create order, you still create wealth. So that was the concept, and now it seems obvious. And for a long time, of course, we fought the management guys saying, you guys are all form, we are all substance, and form is useless. Till the market started paying more and more for form. And you have to recognize that then the engineers who had all the content acquired form in order to get good salaries. We finally recognized that both are important. Because even in the classical economy, if you subtract off too much loss, you get no profit whatever. So both the terms are important. And in that sense, this creation of order is very, very important. It's particularly important in industries where the content is small. By content, I mean the capital investment itself is small. Then if you play around with the entropy, if you essentially make mistakes in the ordering, you can get negative profits, which often happens in small industries. So I think this whole concept of using managerial concepts to minimize the loss, especially, is particularly important in the small and medium scale industries. So I think in that context, this is very important, and we have an incubation cell in the research park, but the incubation, this is even before that. When it started, I think Ganesh has been talking about it for a long time. And what happens is that venture capital is readily available in the US. US is one of the few countries where if you fail, you can put it on your biodata. It's a plus point. If you fail 3 times, they give you a better job. Unfortunately, in India, you have to succeed. So you only tell success stories. So you never report any failures unless you are specifically invited to do so in a very small audience, and the press promises not to say anything about it. So that's unfortunate, but it's to a large extent true even in Europe. So US just happened to be a country of immigrants and people who were somewhat reactionary. They wanted to think differently from what Europe thought, and under that compulsion they invented some good things. They also had some bad things, but overall that's the basis of this whole thing. And the small medium industries are really very, very important for India, particularly because of the employment they generate per unit of investment. I think the estimate in small industries is they generate roughly 10 times the employment per unit of investment. So you're really talking of an industry that needs to be revived. We need a very large number of small industries here, but we also need some stability in that. So you have to incubate good ideas, you have to grow them. But I will also say, as an educationist, I request all the entrepreneurs to first acquire some general knowledge as well. It certainly helps. I mean, the whole purpose of education is to give you a refinement of the mind. And then you have to live, so you go ahead and do your industry-specific thing. By all means, do it well. Whatever you do well. But at the same time, acquire a background. In the background, you don't acquire a background for matlabi reasons. You can pursue your career for matlabi reasons if you like, but initially, acquiring this background has to be done simply for refinement of the mind. And it goes much, much farther than you realize at the moment. I'm talking like a typical old person, but I am an old person, so let me give you this advice. Let me close with just one story. This actually, you might have seen it on Discovery Channel. I don't know if you saw the experiment they did in Kruger Park. About 8 years ago, they had too many elephants in Kruger Park and they culled the elephants. They shot all the oldest elephants. Because when they decided they were going to cull the population, they decided the logical thing is to shoot the oldest elephants. So they shot them all, and then 2 years later they suddenly found a mysterious death of rhinos in the park. And then they discovered the rhinos were actually being killed by bull elephants, young bull elephants. Then they discovered they had no way of telling the bull elephants not to kill rhinos. So they went to the neighboring park, brought back old elephants. And after 2 years, the old elephants told the bull elephants not to bother killing the rhinos, and they stopped. So I'm making a plea that you not only need young, innovative entrepreneurs, you also need old, wise people to tell the entrepreneurs what not to do. Thank you very much for listening. I want to congratulate Rajan for what he has done. And basically you need enthusiasm of this kind to fire people up. Lots of people have these ideas, but they are all below the surface. So you need a Rajan who passionately tells you a few times and then suddenly you all catch fire. And I hope all of you catch fire. Thank you.